Appropriations and Adjudication will now reconvene with discussions of the fiscal year 2017 budget proposal from the Guam Police Department. To preface this budget hearing and future hearings with the fact that the government of Guam has an impending 2015 cumulative general fund deficit of about $120 million. More than now than ever, we all have to understand that increasing expenditures against potential decline or flat revenue levels may not be realistic. We may all have to come to that realization either now or at some time in the future. Before us today, we have the Guam Police Department. I want to acknowledge the presence of my Vice Chair and the Chairman of Oversight of the Guam Police Department, our Majority Leader, Senator Espresso, Senator Nicholas, Senator Underwood, the Minority Leader, Senator Tonietta, and good morning, I'm doing really well today, and Senator Tommy Morrison. Chief.
Magopani Zanahafade, Mr. Chairman and members of the Committee on Appropriations and Adjudication. I am Joseph I. Cruz, the Chief of Police for the Guam Police Department, and I am here in my official capacity along with key members of the Guam Police Department to render testimony on the fiscal year 2017 Guam Police Department budget review process. What you see on the screen is the agenda for this morning's testimony. As my staff officers and I begin our testimony, I would first like to thank the committee for your continuous support of the Guam Police Department, and we look forward to the continuous collaboration between GPD and this legislative body to ensure that the police services that we provide are at a level expected by the people of Guam, while operating as efficiently as possible to ensure that we achieve the best return on our investments for every single dollar spent in our budget. It is important to note that the staff and management of the Guam Police Department has been working closely with the Bureau of Budget and Management Research, BBMR, and the Department of Administration, DOA, to ensure that we are meeting the intent of the current Budget Act and developing solutions that will assist us in achieving the priorities of the Guam Police Department while understanding that we must be as conservative as possible. These priorities are to ensure that our personnel of police officers, statisticians, criminalists, law enforcement dispatchers, mechanics, and administrative and logistical non-uniform employees are led, paid, trained, and equipped to perform their duties. Our testimony this morning provides an initial assessment of the FY 2017 budget bill that was introduced by the 33rd Guam Legislature. GPD expects funding in the general fund, special fund, and federal fund match categories to sustain police operations throughout fiscal year 2017. The analysis of the FY 2017 budget bill in comparison to the FY 2016 Budget Act provides an overview of continuing costs critical to sustaining police services in FY 2017 that is inclusive of appropriate funding that was not afforded to GPD in the current fiscal year. A detailed view of the categories and the appropriated funding sources provided in Bill 25033 indicates the distribution of GPD's budget in the general fund, the special fund, and the federal fund match. The careful distribution of funds within each category is crucial to the success of GPD's operational, administrative, and logistical services, which thereby contributes to the success of the department's overall goals and objectives. As a result of the $5.5 million shortfall experienced in the current fiscal year FY 2016, the Guam Police Department conducted a horizontal analysis of the proposed budget for FY 2017 against the 2016 Budget Act for the purpose of adequately redistributing funds into the appropriate categories. The results of this analysis have produced several findings. Number one, the GPD budget request for FY 2017 must be supplemented in salaries and benefits in order to meet the basic needs of the department. Number two, the current FY 2016 budget will impact future budget cycles if not provided supplemental funding. And number three, the provisions of the FY 2015 and 2016 Public Safety Recruitment Vacancy Pool have placed restrictions on the general fund expenditures by the Guam Police Department. In consideration of the passage of Public Law 33-163, our initial budget proposal for salaries and benefits to the amount of $31,187,047 will not support that recent law. As such, we are requesting that the amount of $742,463.59 be an addition to the salaries and benefits in our proposal in order to meet the intent of this mandate. With this new addition in the general fund appropriation, we are confident that the $40,671,011.59 is sufficient to sustain the department in the upcoming fiscal year. The figures that are presented on the screen depict our strategy for the execution of the general and special funding based on our FY 2017 budget proposal. The amount allocated from the general fund appropriations from personnel, operations, utilities, and capital outlay are at $38,205,243.59. The total amounts for these same categories for special funds are at $1,805,201, while the federal fund match is at $660,567. In the submission of our FY 2017 budget proposal, the Guam Police Department appropriately budgeted for overtime in the FY 2017 budget proposal with an allocation of $1,769,546. According to the Government of Guam-wide audits available for the fiscal years of 2011 through 2014, the aforementioned amount is consistent with the expenditures in these categories over those said years. The Guam Police Department's overtime expenditures in the completed audits published by the Office of Public Accountability range from the lowest in 2011 with $1,165,155 to a high of $1,827,032 in 2012. Overtime expenditures for FY 2013 and 2014 were at $1,701,526 and $1,322,501 respectively. The approach that GPD has taken to reduce overtime expenditures during the current fiscal year are multifaceted and involves greater involvement by the respective bureau chiefs, division chiefs, and the precinct commanders. Chiefs and commanders at all levels have been charged with the duty of analyzing the overtime hours performed by each officer in their command. Weekly command staff meetings require commanders to present their findings regarding overtime in their respective commands and suggest courses of actions that they have taken or will be taking to reduce this expenditure without reducing the public safety services in the designated areas of responsibility throughout the island. As a result, GPD has seen a reduction in overtime expenditures to date, with comparisons made in the first two quarters of FY 2015 and 2016. At the end of the first quarter in FY 2016, overtime expenditures were at $354,190.49, with a reduction of $366,981.84 as compared to the first quarter in fiscal year 2015, when we expended $721,172.33. For the second quarter of FY 2016, overtime expenditures were at $227,932.40, with a reduction of $654,599.24 compared to the end of the second quarter of 2015, when we expended $882,531.64. At the end of the second quarter in the last fiscal year, the Guam Police Department expended a total of $1,279,378.26. At the end of the second quarter this fiscal year, we were at $582,122.89, which is a cost saving to the people of Guam at a total of $697,255.37. On that important note, even the U.S. Department of Labor commended the Guam Police Department for its judicious use of our people's money. The implementation of schedules that differ with each precinct for the purpose of streamlining operations and further reducing overtime will soon take place and provide an additional opportunity for commanders to suggest feasibility. Overtime reduction, officer performance, and the effects of fatigue will be monitored closely for several months in order to determine what is sustainable for the department. All current and future schedule variations are and will be in compliance with the Fair Labor Standards Act adopted through Public Law 30-215. To that point, coordination is being made with DOA to address needed adjustments to the processing of GPD payroll in order to appropriately implement such schedule changes. The Guam Police Department currently maintains a debt of $200,193.37 of promised compensation for personnel who have undergone the complete administrative processes to determine fair compensation. GPD expects that continued claims by personnel for fair compensation will significantly increase the growth of this debt and impact future budget appropriations. The most recent promotion of officers from the rank of Police Officer 1 to Police Officer 2 and Police Officer 2 to Police Officer 3 occurred in October of 2007. GPD officers working in line units have routinely underfilled positions due to the lack of upward mobility. The intention by the Guam Police Department to promote lower-ranking officers was initiated prior to the start of the 2015 fiscal year by identifying vacant position fundings to support the need. This was prevented by the public safety recruitment allocation for FY 2015. The replication in FY 2016 places a restriction on the vacancy pool funding and does not allow for GPD to fund for promotions in each ranks from Police Officer 1 through Police Sergeant 1 at an estimated cost of $590,210. The Guam Police Department is currently recruiting for 9 police officer trainees currently funded by the Department of Interior Compact Impact and COPS grant hiring programs. The 9 police officer trainees will join 5 police officer trainees previously recruited from General Fund Appropriations for a total of 14 POTs intended to enter a police academy, the 8th POT cycle that will start in August of 2016. GPD's FY 2017 budget submission allocates $1,051,237 in salaries and benefits for 25 new police officer trainee recruitments. Along with the 5 federally funded POT positions consistently being awarded to GPD every year, we expect that a total of at least 25 POTs will be recruited and enter training in a police academy for the 9th POT cycle that will start in April of 2017, immediately after the 8th POT cycle graduates. With regards to the recruitment of police officer trainees, the Guam Police Department continues to maintain the standards set forth by the Police Officer Standards and Training, or POST legislation, and is committed to the consistent recruitment of police officer trainees at a rate that is agreeable with these considerations. Number 1, in conjunction with the POST standards, GCC's minimum requirement of 13 students to form a training cohort and 60 days to prepare for resource needs of the students, i.e. ordering books, registration, student education assessment, etc. Number 2, GCC's maximum allowable students per cohort of 30 with a training time allowance of 8 months to complete training requirements accepted by the POST legislation and the POST Commission. And 3, the Guam Police Department's consistent ability to complete background investigations, polygraph examinations, and procurement of services for drug screening for all POT candidates during pre-selection, which is an additional requirement by the POST legislation. The Guam Police Department has consistently budgeted for the recruitment of sworn personnel during each budget cycle in consideration of the funding sources available, primarily through the General Fund Appropriations, with supplemental funding by federal grant programs such as those that were previously mentioned. GPD applies a methodology that incorporates staffing mandates by the GPD Enabling Act, the island-wide community policing strategy, and the dynamics of crime that can be attributed to distinct populations at risk with high rates of arrests. In this regard, in accordance with Chapter 77, Title 10 of the Guam Code Annotated, Article 3, subsection 77301, and Article 2, subsection 77201, the Guam Police Department is designing a table of organization and equipment identifying 526 sworn personnel in the Operations, Investigation, and Services Bureaus, which do not include a support staff. GPD's strength of sworn personnel to date is approximately 320. The slide that you see on the screen depicts the number of vacant positions in GPD that Public Law 33-163 allows us to promote. The 132 positions range from the rank of Police Officer 1 up through Police Colonel. The analysis conducted by GPD provides the amounts for the current cost for the position in each rank, as well as the respective promoted costs and the cost increase. In sum, the total promotions cost is $742,463.59. The efficiency in which GPD budgets for the recruitment and certification of sworn personnel is critical to the approval of our appropriations without the restrictions placed on the department by the provisions of the Public Safety Recruitment Allocation. In FY 2015 and the current fiscal year, FY 2016, we have experienced challenges that have not allowed the department to appropriately apply the funding as a result of this mandate, and request that this committee eliminate that restrictive provision. As we close the discussion for general fund appropriations, it is important to note that the FY 2017 general fund appropriations include an increase in the forthcoming contractual obligations, which includes the system service maintenance agreements of the GPD's land mobile radio system and the law enforcement records management system. These agreements are necessary for the function of systems that are managed by GPD for the operational benefit of the department, in addition to other government of Guam agencies such as the Office of the Attorney General, the Judiciary of Guam, as well as those agencies that currently rely on the SmartNet communications here on Guam. Again, the FY 2016 budget shortfall required GPD to fund these maintenance agreements through allocations in special funds or the Police Services Fund specifically for the current fiscal year, which has directly impacted overall appropriations. For special funds, in FY 2017, the Police Services Fund's appropriation is $1,305,200, which is a decrease of $450,245 in comparison to the FY 2016 Police Services Fund appropriation. Although the significant decrease appears to impact the overall 2017 budget, the distribution of anticipated obligations requested by GPD in the general fund appropriations, if provided, will not impact special funds. The Guam Police Department funds system service maintenance agreements for the Motorola SmartNet radio systems at $480,000, and the Law Enforcement Records Management System, also known as LERMS, at $170,000, with the police service funding on an annual basis. The total obligations to support continued radio communication and police records management services critical to the public safety services provided by GPD is a total of $650,000. There exists an increased obligations brought about by the public safety recruitment pool in the FY 2016 budget bill. GPD is currently recruiting 9 sworn police officers that will be included in the Police Services Fund, raising the total to 14 funded to complete the certification in an FY 17. Funding of this critical need for additional officers recruited to begin certification training in FY 17 is supported by the general fund appropriations. The need includes pre-screening requirements of psychological examinations, drug screening, uniform allowance, holster belt and equipment carrying gear, firearms and ammunition, portable radios, and police academy tuition and fees. The Police Services Funds also supports GPD's annual requirements such as ammunition for firearms qualifications, Government of Guam vehicle inspection fees, blood alcohol content testing, supplies and equipment needs for supporting our K-9 unit, and vehicle lease agreements totaling $231,000. For our Tourist Attraction Fund, appropriations in FY 2017 provide funding in the same categories as the current fiscal year FY 2016. GPD funds salaries and benefits for 4 police officer trainees who have already completed certification training and are working towards promotion to Police Officer 1. These officers are assigned to the Tamuning Tumon Precinct Command. The remainder of the Tourist Attraction Fund monies appropriated to GPD will be allocated to contractual services, supplies and equipment, and capital outlay equipment categories to fund needed equipment and vehicles in order to address the safety of our visitors and the different communities throughout the island. In FY 2016, the Guam Police Department realized some very important accomplishments worth highlighting. In our Operations Bureau, over the last calendar year, we have seen a general drop in the crime rate in Guam. Of all the categories of crime listed in the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Uniform Crime Report, the violent crimes category in Category 1 include homicide, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. So far in FY 2016, we have seen 1 homicide, 45 rape cases, 43 robberies, and 394 aggravated assaults. While this number may seem alarming, GPD has seen a drop in the number of reported cases for these same crimes reported last fiscal year. Based on the statistics gathered from our Planning, Research, and Development section, 547 violent crimes were reported at this time last year. Thus far, in FY 2016, we are at 483 violent crimes. That number is approximately 11% less than the number of violent crimes reported last year. The chart that you see on the screen depicts the most current information that was retrieved from the FBI's Uniform Crime Report. The 11 jurisdictions that are listed have populations and police departments that are comparable to that of Guam. As you can see, the number of reported violent crimes in 10 out of the 11 jurisdictions exceed the number that is reported here on Guam. Based on these figures, Guam averages approximately 54.9% less violent crimes as compared to the other 10 jurisdictions. Assisting the Guam Police Department in deterring violent crimes in FY 2016 is the success of the Neighborhood Watch program. Over the last year, the Guam Police Department has canvassed the community and held town hall meetings in 8 villages and 5 neighborhoods on our island thus far. We are working with the residents of our island to establish a program that allows the community to collaborate with GPD to assist us in making our villages safer. As we continue to collaborate at this level, several stakeholders have come to assist GPD by donating mountain bikes and dirt bikes to our Dedero precinct in order to assist with their patrol effort. Government agencies have also assisted the Guam Police Department as well. To this regard, the Guam Housing and Urban Renewal Authority has assisted GPD by identifying federal funding to acquire property and construct a new Central Precinct headquarters in the Sinanya area. In our Investigations Bureau, GPD has committed $200,000 allocated to it in the FY 2016 Budget Act to lease a facility for the Evidentiary Control Section pending the construction of a permanent facility. To that point, GPD has secured $2 million in Department of Interior Compact Impact federal funding and is working with the administration to acquire property and design a permanent facility to adequately house all the evidence maintained by GPD. Additionally, GPD has committed $437,000 allocated to it in the FY 2016 Budget Act to replace the heating and ventilation air conditioning HVAC system at our crime lab in Manilao, and is working with the Department of Public Works to replace the system altogether. In our Services Bureau, under our Support Division, with the passage of Public Law 32-205, the Patrol Vehicle and Equipment Revolving Fund, the department has seen or has been able to capitalize on revenue collected in FY 2015 with a total amount of $333,418. This first-time opportunity allowed the department to submit requisitions totaling $233,392 to GSA for the maintenance and repair of our fleet, and also purchase 4 marked police SUVs through the procurement process in conjunction with general fund appropriations. In FY 2016, the department will continue to meet the mandates of this funding source to better equip and serve the community. In addition to the department's fleet capability of 20 to 25 marked patrol vehicles on duty for all 4 precincts, we have been graciously augmented with an additional 15 Toyota Priuses that have been committed by one of our community partners, Atkins Kroll. This agreement, identified as the Cape Fleet Use Agreement, continues to enhance the department's Neighborhood Watch program. With regards to some of the federal funding that the Guam Police Department receives, our federal grant dollars has played a key role in outfitting the department's Marine Patrol section. Specifically, the Recreation and Boating Safety Grant Program has purchased 7 pickup trucks fully equipped and a 33-foot rigid hull inflatable boat to enhance its many programs towards recreational and water safety, totaling $583,092. To these points, the Guam Police Department has optimized the use of local and federal funding to sustain its fleet capability and operations at a minimum. However, with the lingering Guam Automobile Dealers Association preliminary injunction, the difficulty remains to provide optimal services to our community. Under my leadership, the community is at the forefront of our initiatives, and with these inadequate resources, the people of Guam will be burdened with less than favorable police services and protection. Lastly, in our administration division, GPD's recreational boating section has executed $221,325 in federal funding for the purpose of training our employees as well as the public on water safety related initiatives. The funding received from general funds will, as well as the police services funds, our records and ID section continues to process over 55,000 services to the public in form of police clearances, firearms registrations and identification cards, traffic accident reports, abstract criminal reports, and firing range permits. In conclusion, as we move forward into the FY 2017 budget submission, the Guam Police Department is requesting a total of $40,671,011.59 in funding. This request is a $4,770,900.59 or an 11.3% increase from the current FY 2016 budget. We are confident that this will sustain our current progress of improving our level of police service. The general fund appropriation accounts for the true personnel costs to include overtime projections and the recruitment of up to 30 police officer trainees and non-uniform civilian employees. Additionally, I would like to address the issues at our Forensic Science Division and our Evidentiary Control Section, allocate funding for our CVPR stipends, purchase parts and supplies, and other funds and contractual services. It is my goal in the coming year to continue in accomplishing my vision for the Guam Police Department by growing through the recruitment of uniform and non-uniform employees, promoting our uniformed personnel, strengthening our civilian volunteer police reserve program, increasing our vehicle fleet, increasing our fixed cost assets, and improving the conditions and standards throughout the department, all the while staying in the bounds of our budget proposal. In the coming months, you will see more police officers in our villages and communities. You will continue to see more downed and new vehicles out on our roads. And you will see a renewed commitment from our CVPR officers who continue to augment our full-time force. The Guam Police Department is committed to our governor's expectation to provide the best police service that we possibly can. Internally, we will continue to improve the efficient and judicious accounting for funding that is made available to our department. Externally, we will continue to work with our community partners and federal counterparts to take advantage of project adoption or sponsorship and funding opportunities. We are also committed to working with this committee as well as the entire 33rd Guam legislature to assist the Guam Police Department in accomplishing its goals and ultimately ensure the needs of our island are addressed within the realm of police services. Sidus Masi para Tempo Midzu Pagu. Thank you again for the opportunity to present our budget proposal. At this point, my team and I are subject to any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. I'll allow your oversight chair to lead off with the questions before I...
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Speaker, Mr. Chairman. And Chief, thank you for your overall presentation. I believe you captured perhaps 90% of all the anticipated questions that were going to be posed as concerns or issues with regards to the entire department. You know, this legislature, and I have to admit that even the chairman in this fiscal year's budget has been a very strong proponent of trying to provide as much resources as possible to the Guam Police Department.
Yes, sir.
And we will continue, or at least I can say, that I will continue to fight and work with the chairman to ensure that we provide you with as much resources as available within the overall budget.
Yes, sir.
The question that I have is, first and foremost, let's take a look at your personnel. In fiscal year 16, how many of your police officers have departed, if not transferred, retired, out of the Guam Police Department thus far? Do you have that number? Okay, while your personnel are working on that, Chief, the other question I have is obviously you highlighted the crime lab and you highlighted the evidentiary facility, and I thank you for continuing to realize progress in terms of moving forward with those particular entities, because they became very, I guess, major issues within the community in terms of providing public safety services. So thank you for highlighting the status in regards to that, the allocation of resources within this fiscal year's budget to be able to address those two particular issues. One is the leasing of a facility in the interim,
Yes.
until such time that an evidence facility, a more comprehensive evidence facility can be constructed. You have also highlighted that you secured $2 million in compact impact funds to be able to ensure that that's addressed. You also worked and reached out to your government of Guam agency partners, such as GURA,
Yes.
to acquire property for the central precinct, and you're looking at eventually realizing that over the course of the next several years. So thank you for planning ahead and looking at that. I'm looking at also the existing facilities island-wide. Does your budget take into consideration the general maintenance and upkeep of all your existing facilities? Because it's always good to look at expanding and building new facilities, but we also need to take care of the maintenance of our existing facilities. Is that addressed in your budget?
It is, Senator. It's addressed in our maintenance contracts agreements under contractual services. We have allocated money set aside for the upkeep and the maintenance of the different precincts, of the headquarters, of our forensic science division, and the evidentiary control section. So, Senator, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but to answer your first question, we have, through resignation or retirement,
Right.
thus far, we have lost 14 personnel in the Guam Police Department.
Are all those uniform personnel?
Yes, they are, 14.
So thus far, you've lost 14 uniform personnel. And then in conjunction with that, you're looking at recruiting, at the conclusion of this fiscal year, 14 police recruits
That is correct.
for Cycle 8.
Yes.
And then 25 come the turn of the calendar year, 25 plus sometime in terms of the next fiscal year.
April 2017 is our projection, Senator.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And at this point in time, you do have 320 uniform personnel.
320 is our current count.
Now, the other question that I would have is, in terms of managing your personnel, I do know that the recent law that was enacted gives you the discretion, and the governor's office the discretion in terms of applying and implementing the promotion process.
Yes.
That was also inserted here as an add-on
Yes.
in terms of requesting an additional $742,000 for these promotions. What are your plans in terms of effectuating that? And I allude to this because, considering the budgetary situation, the question would be, are you looking at mass promotions at one point in time, or are you looking at possibly phasing it in so that you address perhaps the police sergeant positions and then a month later so that it's progressive in nature in terms of
The methodology
advancing the
that we're
promotion?
using, Senator, is to promote so that we can get the most bang for our buck, figuratively speaking, is that we start at the very top and promote. It frees up the promotion system. It frees up the rank structure so that we are allowed to clear those vacancies. And those are the projections that we made with the 132. So if we start at the top and we are confident that with the plan that we've put together, which is a 90-day timeline at this point, starting on July 1st, which is tomorrow, that we're confident that we're able to meet that. Now, we start at the top, we clear the ranks, we clear those vacancies, and then we promote accordingly on down. Versus starting at the bottom, promoting up, and we're only left with a set amount. Once the promotions catch up with each other, we'll still have vacancies, and
Understood.
we'll still be back at where we're at. So in our analysis, we have figured out that it is better to promote on the top, free the positions up, and then promote accordingly on the way down, which will truly solve the problem of the promotions that exist in the Guam Police Department.
So it would be a phased-in process?
Absolutely.
And obviously transparent to your officers so that they can anticipate
That's correct.
the eventual promotions.
Yes, sir.
Now, in conjunction with that, just looking at the overall budget, I know that your request is an additional $4+ million. The chairman opened up his statement recognizing the financial difficulties or challenges that our government, collectively our government right now is faced with. So just looking at that, the chairman knows that every time I need to knock on his door, so far he's been very accommodating in terms of being able to assist and coordinate and provide some support, some additional support to the Guam Police Department. I don't anticipate that changing, but perhaps his demeanor may be a little bit more reserved in terms of providing some resources. So I will continue to work with the Vice Speaker, with the members of the legislature to ensure that we assist you as you carry out your plans. You work on the promotions, you take care of your personnel, you work on the recruitment, you take care of the facilities, and then hopefully the Neighborhood Watch Program will continue to be successful in terms of the partnership with our villages and the mayors. So thank
Yes,
you
sir.
very much for your presentation. And appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator.
Chief, I noticed that when you were discussing overtime,
Yes, sir.
you very carefully chose the word expended
Yes,
and
sir.
repeated it every single time.
Yes, sir.
How do you define expended?
That's monies that we have utilized. It's monies that we have spent in FY15 in comparison to FY16.
Does that take into account the amount of overtime that is actually incurred or whatever accrued during that period?
It does, Senator. It takes into account those what is being incurred.
Because I'm still suffering from the scars of being run over the bus when I tried to give GPD $2 million in May and was told that they had only needed $800,000.
Again,
And then surprisingly told in September that no, we really did need the $2 million. The comparisons that you make take into account beautiful first quarters, but in my experience with GPD, and admittedly you're a new chief, but with the finances, even with the front office, of being very frugal in the beginning about how much is released and how much you can use actually pay out.
yes, sir.
That it's usually paid out in the third, if not, actually on September the 28th or 29th. And so will this overtime reduction be true on September the 28th, or is it only good on June the 28th?
Sir, I will tell you that, number one, I apologize for the figurative scars that you have gotten because of previous incidences by the Guam Police Department. And I will tell you that it has been my goal to be very judicious, be very frugal in the execution of the monies that we have. Knowing that no monies were specifically appropriated to the Guam Police Department for overtime in this current Budget Act, we took a very aggressive stance in curtailing the amount of overtime and being very creative, thinking out of the box and being able to find other ways, management solutions, so that these officers are not accruing overtime. I will tell you that as we take into consideration, as we manage, as BBMR manages the cash, we are working with BBMR, we are working with DOA. The numbers that you see are true numbers. They're true numbers on June 28th, and there will be true numbers on September 30th throughout. We have always been able to pay out our overtime. We have never been faced with any type of fine by Department of Labor, and we will continue to be frugal with the monies that we have, which is why where we're at in just at the end of the second quarter, we're down to $200,000. Now, the numbers are there, and I don't want to revisit that, but I assure you, Senator, that the numbers are true. We pay it out accordingly. We manage the money judiciously, and we ensure that the numbers that are depicted here, that anybody can see at any time in the AS400 are true numbers, and we work very hard to pay our officers the overtime that they have worked.
I would like to commend all the officers in blue for the exceptional work that you all did during the FESPAC.
Thank you, Senator.
And I'm wondering, there's probably going to be a substantial amount for FESPAC. Are you segregating that cost from your regular overtime cost?
Yes, we are. In reading the law for the appropriations that was set forth just for FESPAC overtime, we have separated monies to be able to pay out the amount of overtime that was incurred by our officers during that 15-day time period. That money is being set aside. We pay out our officers accordingly with, based on the fact that the law specifically states that it will be reimbursed by TAF funding. We've set the monies aside, pay the officers out with the expectation that TAF will reimburse the general fund appropriations, of which we are paying out the officers now.
Okay. Now, I just wanted to make sure that you know that I'm willing to have you segregate that overtime out and not be for the full amount for the year.
Absolutely.
But I'm still hoping that on September the 30th, you'd be able to tell me that there was still a substantial reduction in the amount of overtime that you
Absolutely, Senator.
have for the year.
Yes, sir.
Subtracting that out.
Yes, sir.
You and the chairman spoke about office rental for the crime lab, I believe.
For the evidentiary control section?
Evidentiary
Yes,
control
sir.
section.
Yes, sir.
And your testimony also, and he both discussed the possibility of relocation.
Yes, sir.
And I think you actually even mentioned a Sinahanya site.
Yes, sir.
Is there anything in this budget request that can or should take into account any possible needs for the FY17? Or is it because it's a 7-year plan that we don't have to address this early?
At this point in time, again, just as with the other facilities in the Guam Police Department, the proposal, the FY17 budget proposal, does take into consideration the maintenance piece. Because the HVAC system is a very tricky system, and the reason for its demise several years ago is because of the fact that it lacked a sustainable maintenance program, we did allocate that and we did factor into that for the FY17 budget. So we are looking at that. The design for the permanent evidentiary control section, we're still negotiating that, but we are confident that with the $2 million, we should be able to acquire the property and into the design of that include a service maintenance contract, which will not impact the 17 budget.
And just to be clear, as it relates to the promotions that the governor recently approved, do I understand you saying that with the 90-day timeline, that by the end of this fiscal year, you will have fully implemented the promotions that are planned?
It is my intention, Mr. Vice Speaker, that the process it will be very close. It is a very aggressive plan. We have the mechanisms in place internally. It is my intention that by the end of this fiscal year, that the lists are already put together of who exactly is going to be promoted, and the GG1s are there to match that list so that we can forward that to DOA, and that will be ready by the end of the fiscal year. The actual promotions per se, where one person takes a stripe off and replaces it with another stripe, may not happen until the next fiscal year, but as a matter of fiscal accounting, at least the list is together, the GG1 is there, and we'll marry that up at DOA by the end of the fiscal year.
So for accounting purposes, inasmuch as these promotions have been approved to use the vacancy pool that you currently have, as it currently stands,
Yes, sir.
will you be charging the new promotions to the vacancy pool before you start into the new fiscal year amount? Should I have 700 both out of the vacancy pool and 780 into the new budget both? Or if you're not going to be promoting anybody until after the first of the year anyway, should we even account for that anywhere?
It is our intention that the 742,000 will account for the promotions, the whole 132 promotions. We do not anticipate that those promotions will actually take effect per se by the end of the year. The process of which getting the officer promoted by the end of the year is our goal, to execute those monies so that we can use that will carry us into the next fiscal year.
Because that's a substantial amount of money that we're setting aside for promotions.
Yes.
We're taking 750 out of the vacancy pool, and you're asking me to put 742 into the upcoming fiscal year budget so that you have both of them. But in actual fact, you may only be needing 742 and maybe an additional 20 or 40,000 on top of that. But I've given you authorization for 1.5 mil.
Yes, sir.
And so can you save me some money somewhere and tell me what you really don't, what I don't need to put into this? Because I really am scraping trying to.
I understand, Mr. Vice Speaker, and I will tell you, we will go back, we will do some more analysis on this, I assure you. Considering the financial state of affairs as you had briefed up front, we will go back, we'll take a look at it again, and drill down the numbers even more to get you a better figure. The numbers may not change, but we will go back and reanalyze the situation to make sure that our numbers are accurate, sir.
With the number that you've stated that retire, that's a substantial number so far.
Yes, sir, it is.
16?
Yes, sir, it is.
14? But what do you expect by the end of this fiscal year?
Well, there's a number. Our expectation is by the end of the fiscal year, those who have expressed an intent to retire have pretty much have already retired. There are a few we've taken into account. The 14 takes into account those who have submitted a memorandum of intent to retire. That will probably not take effect until the end of the fiscal year as they exhaust leave that's been accrued. So the 14 is what we anticipate. We do not anticipate anything more, maybe by exception 1 or 2. But at this point, those who have expressed an intent to retire, we've included them in that 14 who have already had left the department. Now that number, Mr. Vice Speaker, includes those who have resigned as well. So the attrition is via retirement and resignation together.
Are many of those senior officers?
A majority of them are, yes, Senator.
Or even if they weren't senior officers, they have considerable seniority, so the amount of money that's being paid to them is substantially more than a police officer one.
That is correct. All of these officers do have the required number of years to be able to retire and draw a Guam retirement pension. So each one of them, taking into consideration leave accrued, will be at the minimum 30 years of service. So to answer your question up front, Mr. Vice Speaker, yes, it is a substantial amount because of the longevity of each of these officers who are getting ready to retire.
Has anybody done any analysis at GPD on what that difference is and how that could be utilized for other things? for maybe the promotions without utilizing your vacancy pool?
That is something that we have taken a look at. Lieutenant Andrew Kirigua is the division chief for my administration division. He's already started to do that analysis with our acting administrative services officer. So we're doing those preliminary discussions and doing the analysis to see if it is possible to be able to pull that. That's an analysis that we still have to wait to as we're taking a look at it, Mr. Vice Speaker.
At this point, we're now into the last quarter. How's the release from BBMR and DOA to GPD? How much is still being held in reserve?
Do we know that amount? The 15% is still being held, right? Mr. Vice Speaker, as we understand it, the 15% that is held in reserve up front is still being held in reserve.
You're asking for an 11% increase, but 15% is being held in reserve.
It's, Mr. Vice Speaker, we can submit we are prepared to submit the requests, but that's the management of the cash flow by BBMR.
I understand, but does that mean that maybe we can live with the amount that we currently have appropriated as opposed to the additional $4.4 million appropriation, since it seems like you've gone 3 quarters into this year with a 50% reserve, and I don't see any police officers being laid off or being made to work only 30 hours or whatever.
I understand, Mr. Vice Speaker.
Any other senators? Okay, wait. Let's go with the majority leader. Do you have?
Yeah, thank you, Chief, and good morning, everyone.
Good morning, sir.
Chief, I certainly appreciate your presentation and your candor. You said at the confirmation hearing that you're going to be truthful with the true state of affairs with GPD, and that you're not going to sugarcoat anything, and you're not only going to let the legislature and the governor know, but by letting all of us know, you're letting the community know what your challenges are. And I think GPD so far, I'm seeing, has come a long way with respect to how things are being done now under your leadership and the support of your management and all of the rank and file men and women in blue. I certainly echo my support for the Guam Police Department and do whatever I can to provide that kind of assistance.
Thank you,
I
sir.
want to spend some time asking how overtime is being booked, because in previous budget cycles, we learned that overtime is, in order to circumvent the certification officer process, that overtime is not even booked in the AS-400, so it doesn't show as a payable. So it doesn't show that the department is overspending what it was not only budgeted but allocated. Is that process still the same today?
It is not, Senator. And
That's good to hear.
Yes, it is not, and I will tell you, because of our aggressive effort to curtail overtime and bring it down, we've not had any issues in being able to enter the amount of overtime that's being incurred by the officer into the AS-400. So I understand that if it's not a debt that appears in the AS-400, then figuratively speaking, it's not a debt at all. And it could be off to the side somewhere.
So you're saying that overtime is only authorized based on what's been appropriated?
We stay within the confines of our appropriation, yes, Senator. So we've pushed the authority to work overtime all the way down to the supervisor level. So that operations sergeant, that field supervisor, has the authority to authorize overtime, and all from the chain of command, from sergeant all the way up, has to review those overtime justifications, but the approval is at the supervisor level. And all the approval and the execution of overtime is all within the confines of the monies that are appropriated with us, or for the Guam Police Department.
Okay, so that's really good to hear. The other thing that I've been trying to do together with the support of the legislature here is that there was a previous budget cycle where we appropriated $500,000 from the Tourist Attraction Fund to the Tumon Precinct. we've been trying for some time now to get GPD to quantify what it would cost to operate the Tumon precinct and look into the tourist attraction fund to fund those operations. So whatever those operations can be funded, it will alleviate your need to use the general fund for Tumon precinct operations. And when we provided that appropriation, after a year, we've learned that they've used that money for desktop computers and a vehicle or something, but it wasn't till a whole year after. And the idea was to use that money to put boots on the ground to hire. And I understand from your testimony that you have 4 police officers now assigned to Tumon, and that's the funding source for that now?
For their salaries, yes, Senator. And the commitment that I've made is those 4, the salaries for 4 police officers will continue, with a plan to increase that as well, so that more salaries are being paid for out of the tourist attraction fund for those officers assigned to the Tumon precinct.
Chief, have you been able to quantify what it would cost to just run the Tumon precinct operations?
We have taken a look at that. I don't have a specific dollar amount, Senator, and it's something that, to that point, it was one of the big initiatives that I had up front, is to resurrect the crimes against Tumon tourists, the old CAT program that we had at one point in time. So as I took a look at that and trying to resurrect that program again, because it is a very good program, it's a very viable program, which is synchronized to the Neighborhood Watch program pretty much, we were looking at how much it costs to bring that program back up online, as well as the entire operations for Tumon precinct. So we have done some initial analysis. We are looking at it. I can give you a better analysis of that and give you a hard timeline as to how much, or a hard number as to exactly what that cost will be, because part of that again includes the resurrection, if you will, of the CAT program.
And as we're all aware, the tourism, the visitor industry, and as well as the Guam Visitors Bureau have stepped up to provide individuals to police Tumon, not in the capacity as a police officer could, but they're helping tourists. I don't know if they called it a concierge service or something.
Yes.
But to what level of involvement are you working with GVB and the visitor industry to make sure that there's some coordinated effort to?
We meet with them, Senator, on a regular basis. I sit with Mr. Nate DeKnight and the rest of the board of directors. I met with Mr. Mark Baldiga and the rest of the board directors to listen to their concerns. Now, I will tell you that concierge program that was brought into play is through the efforts of one of the stakeholders in the community who stepped up because of the presence that we have down there to assist the Guam Police Department, which is why, again, I've met with the Guam Hotel and Restaurant Association. I've met with the board of directors with GVB. I stay in close contact with Mr. Nate DeKnight to be able to develop a more robust program in the Tumon precinct. And I will tell you that we are confident that within the next 60 days, in working with Lieutenant Joe Carbolito, who is the precinct commander down there, and our operations bureau chief, that we will have the analysis that you're looking for, and we can give you a hard and fast cost that it would take to operate the Tumon precinct, so that we can take a look at the possibility of using TAF to completely fund that precinct versus dipping into the general fund appropriation.
Yeah, and I echo your statements in support of that concierge program, because there are a lot of success stories.
Absolutely.
They're actually assisted in a couple would-be drownings. They're assisted in, like, a tourist gets stung by jellyfish, and they've taken that tourist back to their hotel and things like that. But yeah, we can quantify those numbers.
Absolutely.
I'm sure we could approach GVB and the oversight chair, Senator Barnes, to try to get the TAF to fully fund what it would require to run those operations.
Yes, sir.
So that it'll alleviate some of the strain on the general fund, and we just have to get creative.
Yes, sir. I understand.
Find more uses and better uses of expending the TAF monies.
Yes, sir.
Okay, those are just my small areas.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank you for the hard work that you all have put into minimizing the overtime. And one of the questions that came up when you had noted the significant reduction was whether there was going to be a correlation between the crime rate and then the reduction in the amount of money that we're paying our officers.
Yes, ma'am.
It was good to hear that there actually has been a reduction.
Yes.
A significant reduction in the number of and the crime rate. So,
Yes.
so that's real good. I just needed clarification on the positions that were identified for promotions.
Yes, ma'am.
Are those, Chief, based on when you identified which positions would be subject to promotion, or the positions in which officers can be promoted? Is that based on actual performance evaluation that had already been conducted by the supervisors, and then noting which of the officers or number of officers that would be eligible for promotion, or are those just based on vacancy that you anticipate, coming up because of the?
Yes. Senator, that is a question in which we've taken a look at. It's a combination, to answer your question up front. It's a combination of both those different aspects. It's the number of vacancies that do exist through either retirement or resignation, through attrition of some sort, as well as the eligibility of our force to be promoted. Because it makes no sense in our mind to try and push for promotions if nobody's eligible to be promoted. So based on the law, which is Chapter 77 of Title 10, and the qualifications based on those position descriptions and the availability of eligible candidates within the Guam Police Department, we took that and we married that up with the number of vacant positions created through the attrition, and that's how we determine here's the number of positions that are available. So it's an analysis that we've done across the board to make sure that 132 positions truly is the number that we need to fill in order to promote our force and continue to recruit on the bottom, so that we don't have a clogging up of the system at the bottom and too many Indians and not enough chiefs, figuratively speaking. So that was the mindset, the methodology that we came up with in determining the 132 positions.
Right, but at the end, right, it would still be based on the performance evaluation.
Absolutely,
and
absolutely.
So the numbers could actually go down at the end of the fiscal year, or can go up.
It could, figuratively
that would be the
speaking.
ceiling.
Yes. It will be dependent
Okay.
on the officer's promotions,
Right.
the officer's performance, exactly. And the PERs, the performance evaluation reports, are part of the process by which the person is boarded and eventually selected.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome,
Thank
ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Chief, and good morning to
Good morning,
everyone
Senator.
here. I was just looking at the on the support division, and I noticed an increase for a request for fuel on a $275,000 increase. Is that just fuel alone for the increase?
It's the increase is your question is the increase specifically for the purchase of fuel?
Right. Yeah.
Yes. And I will tell you, it's a combination of not only the purchase of fuel, but the maintenance, the changing out of the oils, all the service maintenance that is required for the current fleet, and what we anticipate to be able to be up and running in FY17. So based on the amount of monies that we have acquired in the Guam Police Department through the OVIS funding,
Right.
we have a projection of how many vehicles we can get up and running. That same amount also projects the number of new vehicles we can bring into the Guam Police Department. So when we take a look at our current fleet of 20 to 25, plus the fleet of 15 Priuses, and what we anticipate we will be able to bring up on the road, either through the vehicles that are down or brand new vehicles, that projection, the number that you see in the increase, accounts for the fuel for each of those vehicles, as well as all the fluids to be able to manage that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what I was concerned, because I didn't see any other item for tires or oil or things like that, and just
Yes.
set strictly fuel.
Yes.
So I just wanted to make sure that, you're not leaving out any of the
Oh, no, absolutely not,
other
Senator.
fluids or tires
No.
on that. And then also with that, I know a lot of these new vehicles that are coming into the fleet are modernized, more computerized type vehicles. Are your mechanics trained with this type of vehicles, or are you sending them to get trained on these vehicles?
We whenever we purchase these vehicles, and part of the bid specifications through GSA, we always include a maintenance contract.
That's
So
great.
that,
Good to hear.
no offense to my mechanics, they're great mechanics, they're worth their weight in gold, but some of the more advanced work that needs to be done in them, we give it back to the dealer, of whom we've got a contract with via the bid specs, and we give it back to the dealer, and the maintenance is provided by the dealer.
That's good to hear, Chief. I just was looking at that and hoping that was the avenue that you took with
Absolutely.
Additional maintenance
Yes.
contract for the vehicles.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, that's all the questions I have, and I'm satisfied with the answer that Chief gave. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Chief.
Good morning, Senator.
I'm a very big supporter of GPD, and I
you,
think
sir.
that in order for us to make sure that GPD has the resources it needs to accomplish its mission, the budget that we afford it is adequate for everything that you guys are trying to accomplish.
Yes, sir.
So there's a whole bunch of items here that I'd just like to go through with you because
Sure.
I have some concerns about how it all balances out.
Yes, sir.
But before we do that, I'd like to start out. I don't have it in front of me, but do we have the FY 2016 budget that was appropriated? Do you guys have that in front of you?
I have the budget digest, Senator.
Yeah, because I know that you're saying it was an 11% increase. I'm just trying to make sure that I have the right numbers here.
Yes.
So what was your FY 2016 appropriation?
The FY 2016, the total allocation for FY 26, yes. No, this is it right here. This is. I'm sorry. The total allocation that was provided to us in the FY 2016 budget was $35,900,111.
And your 2017 request is?
At this point in time, with the increase that we're asking for, is at
40 something?
40 million. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
$40,671,011.59.
Okay.
So our basic calculation is that amount of $4 million over what our current budget is at a rate of about 11%. At a rate of about 11%.
11%.
Yes, sir.
Now, in your testimony, when you went into the horizontal analysis of 2017 and 2016, you state here, as a result of the $5.5 million shortfall experienced in the current fiscal year. So of this $35 million that you appropriated, you actually received you're actually tracking to receive $5.5 million less than that.
We are not tracking to receive that. In that statement, Senator, the budget proposal that we submitted for the FY16 budget, we asked for $40 million. What we received was 35. So based on the analysis that we did back in October, November of this past fiscal year, was that we see that based on what we proposed, what we asked for up front, and what we say we needed to happen, or the amount of money we needed to be able to function in this coming fiscal year, we saw that there was a $5.5 million shortfall.
For 2016.
For 2016. So that was the analysis.
So of the $35 million that you got, you actually wanted $5.5 million on top of that.
That is what we asked.
2016.
That's what we asked for in the proposal. Yes, sir.
So your actual 2016 needs was $35,900,000 plus 5.5.
That was
you're
what
saying,
was
right?
appropriated to us. What we really needed, based on our assessment, was $40 million. What was actually given to or appropriated to us was the $35 million that I had mentioned.
So 35.9 was what you were appropriated, but you said you needed $5.5 million on top of that, right?
That was our initial assessment when we submitted the proposal.
So in FY 2016, you needed a total of $41,400,000, and you only got $35 million, and now for FY 2017, you're only asking for $40 million. So I'm just curious, how could you need $41 million in 2016 have all these increases in costs for 2017 but be asking for less?
Well, at this point, our proposal takes into account the fact that we are, as I mentioned earlier, there are aggressive plans that we are taking. There are out-of-the-box mandates, not mandates, out-of-the-box initiatives that we are executing right now to be able to curtail that, i.e. overtime, and being able to manage what we need, manage with what's actually given to us. So what we are saying is, last year in our proposal, we asked for $40 million. What was given to us is 35. This year, what we are asking in the proposal is $40 million again to be able to sustain. So the amount that I asked for is $40 million. That's the same amount that I'm asking, that it's very close to the amount or in the ballpark of the amount that I asked for last year. So although we have identified a shortfall, we're making do with what we initially said we needed. So if that was our assessment up front in the beginning of FY16, our analysis was this is what we need. The reality is we got 35 million. So regardless of what we say we need, the bottom line is, as the Vice Speaker alluded to, we just have to be able to figure out how to make it happen. It doesn't mean that in FY17 I won't ask for that same amount. I'm asking for roughly the same amount that I did last year, and in hopes of being able to function based on the analysis that we made. And again, what comes to fruition, that is what we will deal with in the Guam Police Department. So I will tell you, although we've identified it as a shortfall, that's a shortfall based on our analysis. So we are asking pretty much for the same amount as we did last year, because it's roughly 40 million. That's what we asked for last year, a little bit over 40 million. We're asking for the same thing this time around. So I would tell you that there's not a disparity, and that the logic behind that is, how can you function with all these increase? Well, the reality is, based on our assessment, that's what we're asking for. The reality is we only got 35. We're making do with what we have.
Okay, I'm just, if you asked for 41 million last year and you only got 35, and you're saying that it was a shortfall, and you even say here in your statement, you outline the results of this analysis produce several findings. And your second finding there is that the current FY 2016 budget will impact future budget cycles if not provided supplemental funding.
That's correct.
And I'm assuming that supplemental funding you're talking about is that $5.5 million shortfall.
That analysis came about because of the fact that the current budget bill, 250.33, allows for the payment of prior obligations. If we do not receive funding to be able to identify that, we will not have the monies in the next fiscal year to be able to pay that out. So we won't be able to meet the intent of the bill as it's written. And that was our analysis when we looked at the bill, we read through it, and came up with a proposal. We, as a team, figured out that if we don't get the supplemental appropriations, not that we're asking for it with regards to that, because what we're specifically asking for is just the salaries and benefits for the promotions. If they don't get paid out, it'll be very difficult for us to execute the intent of the budget bill when it gets signed into law, because the provisions of that bill allow us to pay out prior obligations. And that's never been done in the past. So as we take a look at it now, if it comes to fruition that that's part of the bill when it gets signed into law, we're not going to be able to meet the intent of the law then, because it fell short in this fiscal year. That's the analysis we made.
Okay, so I'm just trying to keep up here. So you need $5.5 million more for FY 2016.
What we're saying is, in our initial assessment up front, when we asked for over $40 million, we saw that the appropriation given to us was a shortfall. That's what we're saying, is that there was a shortfall. We're making do with the monies that we have. That's what we're saying. We're operating within the confines of the monies appropriated to us. That's all we're saying in the analysis. We're not saying that we need more at this point. All we're saying is we identify that as a shortfall based on the proposal that we initially submitted. And based on that shortfall, the reality is we're operating within the appropriations that were given to us.
So in your testimony, you opened by saying you're going to need supplemental funding but now you're saying you're not going to need the supplemental.
No, what I'm saying up front is because of the passage of Public Law 33163, because that wasn't factored into the budget proposal when it was submitted to BBMR and then later submitted to this legislative body, that wasn't taken into consideration. That's what we're asking up front. Is because that it was passed into law after the submission of the proposal, now at this point in time, we're saying to be able to meet the intent of Public Law 33-163, we're going to need additional funding of $742,000 some odd dollars. That's what we're saying.
33163, that's
the promotions bill or promotions law.
Yeah, see, I think we're talking about two different things here, because this $5.5 million shortfall for FY 2016 that you talk about here, I don't see how that's related to the $700,000 in promotion money.
It's not related to the promotion money,
Okay.
Senator. It's not.
Okay.
Because the $5.5 billion shortfall was something that came about that we analyzed in the Guam Police Department as a shortfall back in the beginning of the fiscal year.
Right, okay.
The 742 didn't come into play until the bill was signed into law. So
Right.
they're separate issues.
Yeah, and so what I'm trying to understand here is your budget. You asked for $41 million in FY 2016. You only got 35, and you needed that $5 million to cover your FY 2016 shortfall. You now are asking for $40 million, which is $1 million less than last year, but you still have the obligations of 163 and some of the other items here. So I'm just trying to really understand, I'm not getting the clarity that I need to be comfortable moving on from this question, because in your statement here, if you can just refer to it, Chief.
Sure.
The second facing page under horizontal analysis of FY 2017 and 2016.
Yes.
And I'll just read it verbatim.
Sure.
As a result of the $5.5 million shortfall experienced in the current fiscal year 2016, the Guam Police Department conducted a horizontal analysis of the proposed budget for 2017 against the 2016 Budget Act for the purposes of adequately redistributing funding into the appropriate categories. The results of this analysis have produced several findings. One, that GPD budget requests for FY 2017 must be supplemented in salaries and benefits in order to meet the basic needs of the department. Two, that the current FY 2016 budget will impact future budget cycles if not provided supplemental funding. And I take that supplemental funding, I put a red line around it, and then I go right back to that $5 million shortfall that you mentioned at the beginning of that statement. And I'm saying, is that the $5.5 million? Is that the supplemental funding that you're needing? Were you short that $5.5 million? And then in the beginning of our conversation, we talked about how you asked for that, but you got less than that. So I'm assuming that for FY 2016, that number 2 line item that you're talking about, there is that $5.5 million.
Yes.
Is that correct?
What number 2 is stating at this point in time is that because when we read through Bill 25033, what we are saying is that there is the opportunity for agencies to pay out prior obligations, which has been accumulated over previous years. So what we're saying is that separate and apart from the $5.5 million shortfall, if we do not get the supplemental funding to be able to deal with those prior obligations, we will not be able to execute the FY17 Budget Act as it's written. That's what we're saying. The $5.5 million shortfall is an analysis that we made up front when we asked for over $40 million in the 2016 budget, but only received $35 million in appropriations. So that's what we're saying. Now, again, it's something that we saw based on our analysis, that this is what we asked for, over $40 million, a little bit over $40 million. What we got was only a little bit over 35. So in our minds, as we conduct operations throughout, or prepare to conduct operations throughout the fiscal year, we are saying we project, or we anticipate a shortfall. We're going to experience some kind of a shortfall, and we're going to have to be creative on how we manage that money. That's where that number 1 comes from. Number two comes from the fact that if, in reading the budget law or the budget bill, if we don't get funding for that, if it's not funded for those prior obligations, as the bill is eventually signed into law, and we have the authority to be able to pay out those prior obligations, we won't be able to meet that intent. Those prior obligations will continue to be prior obligations in the next fiscal year and maybe into the fiscal year after that. That's what we're saying. Is there a connection between the supplemental funding for prior obligations to the $5.5 million? What we're saying is, if we had that additional $5.5 million and the bill or the law, FY16 Budget Act, allowed us to pay for it, we could take care of that. We would have been able to take care of that.
See, I'm just getting I'm just getting a little bit more confused, and it's starting to compound for me, because my initial intent was to establish that you needed $5.5 million for FY 2016, and then when I wanted to go into was bills 304, 305, 306, 307, and 308 that authorized the expenditure for prior year obligations prior to FY 2016. That we just entertained in the last session, and this was for overtime and vendor payments and the third cadet cycle and court-ordered obligations, and then the promised compensation. And so I was under the assumption that your $5.5 million shortfall was just an FY 2016 shortfall, plus I believe this added up to about $1.8 million in additional prior FY 2016 obligations. And so I was assuming that you had a 5.5 shortfall for 2016 plus 1.8 for prior 2016, and that takes it to $7.3 million. So I'm really trying to understand now, if you needed $40 million to operate FY 2016, you only got $35 million, and we had these bills come through that had another $1.8 million that popped up in prior years. Wouldn't that be a $7.3 million FY 2016?
No, it is still $5.5
difference?
million.
So that $1.8 million is inclusive of the 5.5.
Yes.
So we can establish a baseline that for FY 2016, because of these prior year obligations and maybe some others that aren't covered in these bills, you're short $5.5 million for 2016.
For 2016. That's our initial, that was our analysis up front.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So we can establish then that you're short $5.5 million for 2016. Now for 2017, you're asking for an 11% increase from the $35 million to $40 million. But that's not inclusive of the $5.5 million that you're short for 2016.
A lot of that was unfunded mandates that they put into the bill, remember?
The $40 million that we're asking for at this point in time is to be able to deal with unfunded mandates, is to be able to deal with all the operations across the board, to pay out salaries and benefits across the board. So what we are saying is, in our analysis of what we need to be able to do in FY17, to be able to take care of all the debts that we have, to be able to pay off everything that we have, the $40 million, the over $40 million that we're asking for, what we're saying is sufficient to sustain that.
So your current budget request for FY 2017 covers the increases that you're looking for organically and with some of these other laws that passed, as well as the $5.5 million in prior year obligations?
No, the $5.5 million, our prior obligations is not $5.5 million.
Or whatever that shortfall is that you said here in your statement of $5.5 million.
I'm not sure I understand your question, Senator.
I'm trying to balance the amount that you're asking for with the amounts that are outstanding, and you said that you have a $5.5 million shortfall for FY 2016. For FY 2017, you're asking for $40 million, which is an 11% increase over your amount of FY 2016, but that does not include the $5.5 million that you're saying you're short here for 2016. And so it looks to me that, just adding that $5.5 million in, you're going to actually need $45 million.
No,
for FY
if you add the $5.5 million to the $35 million that we were appropriated, it puts us in the same ballpark for the monies that we're asking for this year.
Right, but then how can you increase your obligations for this year over last year and still be asking for the same amount?
What we're asking for in the increase is $742,000 to be able to deal with the promotions. That's the increase we're asking for. So although we see a $5.5 million shortfall in this fiscal year, what we're saying is without the addition for the promotions to deal with Bill 33163, we are saying that we are willing or we can make it happen with that initial dollar amount of $39 million.
Let me just simplify it. In FY 2016, you needed $41 million without promotions. And now in FY 2017, you're asking for $40 million, which is $1 million less with promotions. And so it isn't balancing for me. And I'm trying to understand, how can you need $41 million this year without promotions and then only need $40 million next year with promotions?
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, Captain Charfers, the bottom line is this. In 2016, we asked for $40 million. We only got we got a reduction of $5 million. And so all we're saying is that to complete this fiscal year, we're going to need a supplement of that $5 million to cover the cost of what we projected. In last year's budget, we asked for 40. We only got 35. That's an assessment that the staff has made. What we're saying now is for 2017, give us the $40 million, and we're not asking for anything more. Whether it balances or not, our assessment is that we can operate in 2017 if you give us that $40 million. Now, my understanding is that the supplemental budget for 2016 is not until a few weeks from now, unless it's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. So, if you want us to come back and do a 2016 analysis, like we did for the 2017, we're prepared to do that. Even by next week, that presentation is already prepared. We have shown it to the chair. And this is how we were short. So all we're saying is in this 2017 budget, we want 40. Last year, we were kind of short 5. And we're going to probably need that $5 million to complete the fiscal year, which is what we predicted back in 2016. And basically, that's as simple as I can put it.
So if you're going to need $5 million to cover 2016, then that means that we're going to have, in 2017, a $5 million prior year obligation outstanding of $5 million.
That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is for 2017, if you give us $40 million, we can operate that fiscal year, not barring anything else. In 2016, we're short $5 million, which is what we predicted when we had the hearings, because our submittal was about $40 million. So all we're saying in this public hearing is give us the $40 million for 2017 and we'll be good. Don't worry, you don't have to worry about that $5 million next year because that's for 2016. But keep in mind is that we've predicted already that we needed $40 million for last year. We didn't get $40 million. We only got 35. Right. And try as we may, whether we get that money or not, we're going to try and make ends meet, but we're short and we're just letting the legislature know that we're prepared to present the same presentation that we presented to the chairman in outlining exactly where that $5 million is at.
So you need $5 million more for 2016.
Our assessment is based on the number that we asked for upfront last year and the number that we got this year, and we verified these numbers with BBMR. We say our analysis is that to operate in this fiscal year, we needed $40 million, over $40 million. We were only given 35. What we are saying is there is a shortfall. Okay, that's what we're saying at this point in time. We've given an in-depth presentation to the chairman in his office outlining every single cent and where every single cent would have gone had we gotten that $40 million from the legislature. That's what we're saying. So at this point in time, we are making do with the monies that we have. We have cut overtime down. We have changed the way we conduct operations. And that's how we're able to do more with less. It's making more happen with the less money that we have. It's not it's not asking for the world and expecting that and saying that we're not going to make it happen. Regardless of what this legislative body gives the Guam Police Department, we will figure it out. We will figure out a way to make it happen. And that's what we've been doing. Since we asked for 40 million and we only got 35, what we're saying is, give us what we need. If you don't give us what we need and you give us the 35 million, we'll figure out how to make it happen. We'll work with BBMR, we'll work with DOA, we'll work with each one of these employees to figure out how to curtail overtime and figure out operations. But at the end of the day, we will not shortchange the people of Guam. Regardless of what you give us, we will take care of the people, whether it's 40 million or 35 million, we'll make it happen. We'll deal with BBMR, we'll deal with DOA, we'll deal with this legislative body, we'll deal with the oversight, and we'll figure out how to make it happen. So whether it makes sense logically and here this morning or not, the bottom line is what we're asking for is 40 million. That's what we're saying at this point in time. Whether it makes sense to 16 and there's an additional 5 million here, there, or wherever, the bottom line is we asked for 40 last year, we only got 35. We're asking for 40 this year, we get what we get. At the end of the day, we're going to make it happen. And when it's all said and done, I'm not worried about the 5 million here, there, or anywhere, because the Guam Police Department will continue to be judicious in the use of its monies. We'll figure out how to serve and protect our people and keep our community safe based on the monies that you appropriate for us.
I very much agree. I very much agree with you. I want to just make sure you have the money that you're supposed to get. And if you're short 5 million this year, that shortfall is not going to go away.
I understand, Senator.
It's going to continue to accrue on GPD.
I understand. And that's something that myself and this team has been working with the oversight, been working with this committee, been working with BBMR and DOA. So I understand what the chairman is saying, what the vice speaker is saying. I understand that we are in dire straits. It's the fiscal climate of our government. We're working with that. Okay? If the money's not there, like the senator said, there's not going to be a supplemental appropriation. We understand that. We get what we get, we'll make it happen. That's the bottom line. So I'm not going to squabble over what monies we thought we had and we didn't have. All I'm saying is this fiscal year, or for the upcoming fiscal year, here's what I'm asking for. We get what we get, we'll make it happen at the end of the day.
I just want to make it clear, Chief, I'm not squabbling. I want to make sure you're getting the money you need. And if you were 5 million short this year, I don't want you to be 5 million short going into next year. That's why I'm asking these questions. Because if you can turn around and instead say, yeah, you know what, we do need 5 million more than what we're asking for in 2017, that's something we're going to have to deal with.
I understand, Senator. And
you know,
again,
I'm trying to articulate the case that, did you guys need more money and why didn't you guys get it? But what you're basically coming back and saying is you're going to make it work with whatever you get, and that's fine, but GPD shouldn't have to do that.
I understand, Senator. And up front, I went to the oversight chair. I went to my oversight chair, and I presented I gave him a sexy presentation on where exactly the monies we were shorted. And had we gotten that money, where it would be. My entire staff went into his office and we said, Mr. Chairman, here's what we got. We asked for 40, we only got 35. Now let me tell you what the impact will be in our assessment, and we spelled it all out, down to the last red cent. So I understand, and I think I've been working with the Senator closely enough, and BBMR and DOA, to be able to make it happen. I understand, Senator San Nicolas, that you are trying to give us the monies that we need to be able to go out and adequately serve and protect. There has to be a happy balance between what you're able to be able to appropriate for us, the reality of the situation on our fiscal state of affairs, and truly what we need. We have to find that balance somewhere in between. Now, I understand you're trying to chase down this 5 million. The reality is we asked for it last year and only got 35. We're asking for it again, or roughly the same amount, this year. And at the end of the day, the very bottom line, that's what it is.
My only I understand. My only thing is as you add the as you increase the obligations of the organization, you're not going to be, and you're already having all the challenges that GPD has with its mission, and the officers working as hard as they're working and accruing all this overtime. As you add more obligations on top of that, it just provides further weight, and that's why I want GPD to be pursuing the full amount that it's going to be needing.
I understand,
and to be going from year over year and asking for less when it needs more is just, that's. I don't want to keep doing that to the police department.
I understand, sir, and I would tell you, it's not that we're asking for less. because in the reality, we're asking for about the same ballpark figure. And I think if you take roughly the ballpark figure that we're dealing with now, it's roughly the same amount. And then you add into that all those aggressive, out-of-the-box thinking and initiatives that we have been implementing in the Guam Police Department. We continue to ask for the same. We continue to streamline our operations, think out of the box on how to make things happen with less amount of money. I think we'll be able to meet the mark and be able to adequately serve and protect our people.
Continuing on in the line of conversation, when you talked about the overtime expenditures, you mentioned here in the submission of our 2017 budget proposal, the Guam Police Department appropriately budgeted overtime in FY 2017 budget proposal with an allocation of $1.769 million.
$1,769,546.
Right.
Yes.
Is that your original budget request for FY 2017 before public law?
Yes, it is.
33-163?
Yes, it is.
And see, my question now becomes, when you give out these promotions and you increase the payroll cost by $700,000 and you have a base overtime cost of $1.7 million, shouldn't that overtime expense also go up because the payroll cost?
No, it will not. No, it will not, because if you consider our aggressive plan to curtail overtime, even if you promote these officers, the plan is to alleviate overtime altogether. That's the whole reason why we asked for 309 to be introduced as a bill and why it got signed into law. Because eventually, with this plan, although it appears on the surface that if you're going to pay these people more, that you're going to pay them more in overtime. No, the issue is not the pay. The issue is the officer actually working the overtime. The issue is figuring out whether or not this officer really needs to work the overtime and be judicious about that. How can we make more happen with less? The issue is not continue to make the officer work overtime and then you're going to have to pay him based on that promotion. Then the problem starts to compound itself, as you're alluding to. That is not our way to deal with this. Our plan is with the promotions and the hiring together. The plan is to stamp out overtime altogether, to stamp it out completely. Because by doing that, if we go along the analogy that you say, then the plan is never to reduce overtime. We will continue to stay where we're at. We're not going to have a plan to continue to recruit into the police department, and we're always going to deal with overtime. Considering the financial state of affairs, the plan is to figure out a way, how are we going to be able to stamp out overtime? The way to do that is recruit at the bottom, promote all the way along the chain of command, and allow the system to work itself, and eventually stamp. That's how we see we're going to stamp out overtime. So to answer your question up front, Senator Siklis, no, we do not anticipate that we need more in overtime because we're very aggressive. Any one of these commanders sitting here in front of you will tell you we're very aggressive, and we work very hard to stamp out the overtime. And if we don't need to work it, then we don't need to work it. And if we do need to work it, we figure out solutions so that it's the person and not necessarily the hourly wage that we're going to be worried about, thus sending the request for $1.7 million even higher. So to answer your question up front, Senator, no, we don't anticipate an additional need for overtime at this point.
Yeah, I appreciate the aggressive efforts. Again, it just comes back down to numbers. And when you're asking for $1.7 million in overtime money, and that was before we gave out the promotions. Now we give out promotions to half of the force, 120 officers out of 330, a third of the force. And those promotions aren't going to increase the base payroll by $700,000. Mm-hmm. I just don't see how, when you're accruing so much overtime, you can promote 30% of your force and not have to also increase your overtime numbers.
Senator,
especially since these overtime figures should have already factored in all of your aggressive overtime cost-cutting efforts. So unless you're going to promote and then get more aggressive in cost-cutting, but I'm just, again, the reason why I'm bringing this up is, if you need more overtime, we need to know that now, so that this $700,000 increase in base payroll could actually translate into anywhere from a $350,000 to a $1 million increase in overtime costs.
Well, Senator, I will tell you, in the FY16 budget proposal, we asked for We asked for over $1 million in the FY16 budget proposal. Do you know how much money this legislative body gave us in overtime? $0 was appropriated to us for overtime, not one red cent. Knowing that we are going to continue to accrue overtime, this legislative body didn't give us a dime in overtime. But yet, with that analysis that you did not give us any overtime, knowing that we were going to accrue overtime, we had to figure out how to make something out of nothing. Because you gave us nothing this year in overtime. But yet we managed to figure it out. How is that possible? How do we work overtime for monies that were never even appropriated to us? How much, where are we at right now? $540 some odd thousand dollars? That's over $500,000 that you never appropriated to us. But yet we figured it out. Where are we going to pull money from within the general funds to make it happen? Now, one could argue that Chief, maybe we didn't line item it for you, but we gave you the general fund appropriation. That's up to you to figure out. Okay, I got it. So we figured it out. So what we're saying then this time around is based on our needs for the department, just like we did last year, we're asking for this amount, 1.7. Now, whether you do the same thing you did like this year and not specifically appropriate something to us, we will figure it out within our general fund appropriations on how to be able to pay overtime. And that goes back to the aggressive, out-of-the-box thinking, the initiatives that we've implemented in the Guam Police Department to be able to bring down overtime because we didn't get a specific allotment of money for overtime. Unlike the year prior in FY15, this legislative body gave the Guam Police Department $1 million and then had 2 supplemental appropriations on top of that for a total of $2.9 million, of which the Guam Police Department expended 2.6. This fiscal year, no specific monies were allocated to the Guam Police Department, not one red cent, but yet we managed to make it happen.
But I really do think that you should clarify that. We gave GPD a lump sum for the entire amount. We didn't break it down. If you want us to break it down, we will.
I understand.
But the thing is that please quit holding it up like this as zero, because it wasn't zero.
Well, the year before it was 1 million, and that's what I'm saying, Senator.
Yes,
the year before it was 1
and
million.
you actually spent 3.16.
That's correct.
So I'm just saying we gave you the ability to be able to move money the way that you wanted to. And you and BBMR and DOA allocated how much of that $35 million you were going to set aside for overtime. How much did you allocate for overtime when you and BBMR had the opportunity to set the allocation?
I understand, Mr. Vice Speaker.
How much did you set aside for overtime?
$409,000 is what we set aside.
Thank you. So quit holding out the zero, because when you had the opportunity to do it yourself, you only set aside $400,000 for your overtime.
I understand, Mr. Vice Speaker, and you're right. We set it aside. It was given to us in our lump sum appropriation. But in comparison to the year before that, you gave us $1 million.
You keep making the comparisons are unfair because we didn't line item last year's.
Again, I bring this up, Mr. Vice Speaker, with no offense to you or anybody else in front of the committee, but in trying to address Senator Nicholas's concern on why are we only asking for 1.7 when we're doing promotions, to answer that point, I brought that up, Senator, with no disrespect to this committee, to drive home the point that even though monies weren't specifically allocated to the Guam Police Department, as was the year before, we did figure out that we needed to push aside $409,000.
You knew that this legislature knew that it intended for you to make the managerial and executive decision on how much you were going to set aside for overtime.
I understand.
Because you came before us and told us you were going to be judicious.
That's correct.
And so we trusted you. And so we gave you the ability to be able to act like big boys, that you would be able to do it yourself.
And that's
if
what
we didn't think that you were mature enough to be able to handle it, I would have given you a line item that included how many badges you could have.
I understand, Senator. I understand.
But
and I agree.
Trusted you enough to do that, to give you a lump sum, not to expect that you're going to come back and publicly go zero. It's not true.
I understand the lump sum appropriation in the general funding. I completely understand that. And you talk about us being big boys. I agree. and Senator Nicholas, to drive that point home, we are going to be big boys with the $40 million to be able to make operations happen with a projection of $1.7 million.
And to keep insisting that we shorted you $5 million, you're currently right now testifying that the administration is holding 15%, which is $5.4 million of the appropriation that we gave you. Coincidentally, it's all the same amount. Do you have any further questions?
Okay. So, and again, the reason why I'm asking these questions is I just want to make sure that we're not going to have a shortfall that we're going to have to address. And the reason why Chief and GPD is because I want to make sure the department's getting the money it needs. And when bills 304, 305, 306 to 308 came through to cover prior year obligations, I said, you know what, we got to stop making the department push off whatever it can push off and then come back and ask for prior year authorizations. We need to give you guys what you need up front and stop having you guys carry it over every year, because then it's just a weight on the department's back. So we have the 5.5 million that we still need to reconcile, at least in my mind. According to you guys, that 1.8 million that's mentioned in these other bills is part of that, is supposedly part of that 5.5. And then we have overtime that you're saying is okay. You don't need to factor in an adjustment because of the promotions. I really think it would be wiser to, but I mean, you're very insistent that you don't need to. That takes me lastly to your testimony here about Public Law 33-163. And here in your testimony, you make it very clear GPD's FY 2017 budget submission allocates $1.51 million in salaries and benefits for 25 new police officer trainee recruitments.
That was in our proposal, yes, Senator.
Yeah, but in Public Law 33, I'm sorry, I won't have the bill number here. 33-163, it very clearly states, the Chief of Police shall, for fiscal years 2017 to 2021, determine the total cost to conduct a recruitment cycle of at least 40 police cadets. So here you're asking for $1 million for 25, but this law that also includes the promotions is saying you're supposed to hire 40. And so when I did some quick math and I divided it, it comes out to about $42,000 per officer, and a difference of 15 officers means that in order to comply with this law in this budget, you're going to need, on top of all the other things I talked about, an additional $630,000 to do the 40 police recruits that it's mandating here in the law. So I wanted to bring that up because I was worried that you don't have the $630,000 needed to comply with this. And there's other laws in the books that police officers have brought up to me that showed ratio requirements and everything. And I want us to get past this practice of having something in the law that sounds good, but we're not funding it, we're not following it. And so, this 40 police cadets in the law was intended to address the 100-some odd police shortfall in manpower that we have between 2017 and 2021. And so if we're only going to be hiring 25 in 2017, and we already begin scofflawing this provision in the bill, how does that play out to 2018, 2019, and 2020, 2021? And so I wanted to bring this up and say, maybe you should request for an additional 630,000 and bump this recruitment target up to the mandated 40, so that by 2021 we can meet the objective of hiring that many police officers. And it just further compounds it because, as the oversight chairman asked earlier, we lost 14 to attrition. And that kind of ties into, I guess, what I wanted to close with, Mr. Chairman, and that is that with these promotions, did you guys do a study on how many officers will retire after they get promoted? Because it will bump up their 3 highest years if they're on the old plan, and that will exacerbate the attrition numbers. We may see a lot more, especially since you're going to be promoting top-down like you testified earlier, we may see a lot more officers than usual on the trend lines retire as a result of the promotion, and rightfully so, nothing against that. But then will that further exacerbate the manpower shortage? And then will that further exacerbate the overtime expenses?
That is something, Senator, that we need to take a look at. Nobody else has submitted any letters of intent to retire. So although there are those that may want to consider it, may want to contemplate it, we can do an analysis to figure out who would be in the zone, if you will, to be able to retire, be able to draw a retirement of those people being promoted. That's something we can take a look at to be able to figure out exactly what you're asking at this point.
Thank you, Chief. And I just wanted to close. I appreciate everything that you guys have done. I mean, you guys are working on fumes. You know, I don't think that's a secret to anybody up here in this body. And the reason why I wanted to go through this exercise was because, you know, maybe I'm too much of a numerical alarmist, but the numbers, if all these things do factor in, I mean, the 5.5 million plus the overtime difference plus some of these other things that weren't able to be quantified. I mean, we're looking at anywhere between $7 to $9 million potential on my scary number side. I always overproject. I'm always very conservative that way.
Yes.
And I just don't want that for GPD.
I understand, Senator.
So I'm of course I defer to the budget chairman on your budget, but I would advise maybe a sit down to possibly reconstitute everything and figure out where there might be additional needs. And just let us know, and then we're accountable, and then it's up to us to say, hey, yeah, you asked for 40, you only gave you 35, what's up with that, But if you're asking for 41 last year, you only got 35, you're asking for 40 now on top of all these other additional potential costs, you need to stick it to us and make us be the ones to be accountable for saying, hey, we didn't give you everything you asked for.
I understand.
Thank you all for everything that you
You're
did.
welcome. And again, Senator, please note that I meant no disrespect in waving up the zeros, Mr. Vice Speaker. Again, it's we get passionate about what we do in the police department, and as Senator St. Nicholas said, we're operating on fumes, figuratively speaking. We do more with less, and when we do this analysis up front, being the fact that it was line item before, not line item this time around. And I appreciate the fact that you exercise the big boy concept and allowing us to be able to handle our monies accordingly based on ourselves. The reason for saying that was because of exactly that. It was line item before, not line item now. And but we've managed to figure it out. And I think at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, is just figuring out how to make it happen with the monies that's being appropriated to us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let's turn the page to your civilian personnel. How many civilians do you presently have?
We have approximately 52 non-uniform employees.
How many have retired to date, this fiscal year, or left the department?
Through retirement, we've only retired one or two, I believe, Senator. Isn't it Pops?
Okay.
Oh, no. And then the two from maintenance. So we are at about 3. Definitely less than 5 civilian personnel have retired.
Are you looking at refilling these positions and hiring additional civilian personnel? Because the follow-on concept behind this is obviously getting your men and women in blue out into the streets and to carry out their beats. So in this particular case, that's where the question is coming from. Are you looking at, based on the budget request, hiring additional personnel to replace the 2 or 3 that have departed and then to further support your department?
The budget request proposal does take into effect the replacement of these non-uniform employees who have either resigned or retired.
And thank you
the
for...
budget proposal does take that into account.
Okay. Also, thank you for recognizing the promised compensation obligation. And the tool that the good senator, the previous speaker, had alluded to is obviously a tool that was extended to the chief executive in terms of allowing him, should he identify the resources to be able to take care of some of these obligations, prior year obligations. One thing I need to clarify is that right now, or prior to the passage of that provision, there was no mechanism in law that would have authorized the department to at least take a look at that and legitimately pay off some of these prior year obligations. Now that that tool has been extended to the chief executive and to the Guam Police Department, we're anticipating that you would exercise some component of that, even if you address 2 or 3 of those bills, two of those pieces of legislation in prior year obligations, not necessarily all 5, then you would have addressed at least a portion of that particular requirement. So I thank you for recognizing that. I just wanted to, once again, thank your officers. In terms of visibility, I think, Chief, since you've assumed your responsibility, we've seen more of our police officers visible in the community, and I want to thank you and thank not only your leadership, yourself, your leadership, your team within the Guam Police Department, the civilian personnel, but just as importantly, your police officers who are out there in the beats every single day. There are challenges that they experience. We have worked together on certain issues. You've been able to address them within a reasonable time frame without it getting out into the public, and I appreciate that working relationship, and I certainly look forward to the discussion on your budget with the budget chairman. Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chief, and thank you, GPD, for the presentation this morning. I first off want to thank you for your efforts with some of the, again, looking at the police services fund and the special fund aspect of your operations, or that supports your operations. And having firsthand working closely with your team, Chief, and going through the AAA process to make the necessary adjustments to offset the administrative costs and the needs of your operations. You pointed out here in your special funds report that there will be a significant decrease from 1.3. I mean, you'll be allotted 1.3 short $450,000. So you're basically making a request about 1.8 million for the special funds appropriation.
Senator, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Right. So I'm trying to get a handle on this, because the goal when we're working with GPD to make those adjustments, Lieutenant Kirikwat, and ensuring that the adjustments with the fee structures and whatever that supports the operations, that it would offset the shortfalls actually within the administrative aspect of your department. Now, you're pointing out 1.3 million here, and you're saying that decrease would be significantly impacting the operations at 450,000 less. So if you add that together, you are basically looking at 1.8 million. Is that correct?
What we're saying, Senator Morrison, is that although what is being put in the proposal is $1.3 million, which in our assessment is 450,000. It's a decrease of 450,000. Should we get the general fund appropriations that we will have, it will not impact those money. It would not impact what the Police Services Fund normally funds throughout the fiscal year.
With the existing structure adjusted, right, does it offset those needs? Existingly, what is the historical? I mean, my understanding is it was just adjusted about a couple years ago. Historically, are we generating about 1.3 million or 1.5 million from these fee structure that has been adjusted?
It's $1.3 million historically over the years since we've gone through the AAA, the Administrative Adjudication Act. Since we've gone through that and adjusted the fees, historically we are bringing in about $1.3 million in police services.
But now we're saying it's still short 4.5.
Just from last year to this year, our assessment is that we see a decrease in about $450,245. So that's our assessment, is up front based on what we see from last year, what we're seeing throughout the fiscal year, and doing a little bit of projection forward in 2017. Although we're asking for $1.3 million, if we get everything on the general fund appropriations, it will not impact the overall police operations of what Police Services Fund normally pays for.
Right, and I would like to work with you folks on this, because the goal again with this special fund and the Police Services Fund, I know, is really not to even with the shortage for the police services fund for what it's supposed to do, obviously impacts your general fund appropriations needs. And what I'm concerned about is that was not the goal of making the adjusted or necessary adjustments with the fee structure, so that we don't impact the general fund appropriations.
Yes,
so,
Senator.
seeing that there has been a lot of progress, though, seeing that it's generated to a level and going successfully through the AAA process. And I know it used to generate about 450 or 500,000, and now we're seeing a 1.3. So
Yes, sir.
that's good to see that trend going up and helping the department. But I would like to also see how we could not, working through this process, that it would not feed into the general appropriations. So are you looking at that? I mean, I know special funds not specifically to the fee structures, but it also comes from other sources that supports the service fund.
Yes.
So I'm looking at it from the auditor's report, the asset forfeiture fund, parking service fund.
Yes.
There's other things that help
Yes.
the special fund total. Are you guys looking at that overall picture? Because we're getting there, we're very close, but to offset, I'm not saying we're going to offset everything, but the whole goal of the special fund and the adjusted fee schedule was to not trickle into the general fund appropriations.
I understand, Senator, and I agree. In looking at it from a holistic point of view, yes, when we consider all the other special funds that we bring into the Guam Police Department, as well as the TAF, as Senator Respicio had mentioned, when we take all that into consideration and the general fund appropriations, the impact that we see with the $450,000 reduction will not affect overall police operations. Does it mean that we're going to pull specifically from the general fund? Not necessarily, because there are other funding sources available, as you had alluded to include the tourist attraction fund. So the bottom line is, if we get the general fund appropriation, taking it in consideration or in conjunction with the other funding sources, the bottom line is, at the end of the day, it doesn't impact our operations.
Okay. One last thing, Chief.
Yes, sir.
I brought this up, Public Law 33-41 and video security systems. I always bring it up, and I know it's administered by the FAR, the E911 fund, and know the procurement's taking shape right now. But in the overall scheme of how we're trying to reduce overtime and as it relates to this process, I hope that could be built into the overall initiative to reduce overtime. Although it's not the intent of those systems to reduce overtime, and that's paramount to protect our community, it does have a great impact looking at studies throughout the nation and how it's used and monitored right. I'm not going to underestimate the cost that might go into this, but the overall long-term efficiencies that it brings to the department, I'm hoping through your efforts that you will incorporate this into your plan with Guam Fire, who administers the
Yes.
E911 fund. We gave flexibility with that fund to allow the Guam Police Department to also be part of how that is sourced out and how it's administered as well or carried out to support your needs. At the end, again, when we talk overtime and seeing how this has addressed overtime throughout the nation as well, I'm just hoping that will be some type of pilot program that would take shape, carefully placed, and see how it works throughout our community. We know it works, but I would like to see, too, from the aspect of cost, how this could help the department overall throughout the island minimize the impacts with overtime. But thank you for the presentation and breaking down the efforts here throughout the department, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much, and thank you to my colleagues. Thank you again, Chief, for a very thorough presentation. We'll take a very short recess because we have DOC waiting in the wings for
Yes.
the next presentation.
Thank you,
very
Mr.
much.
Vice Speaker.
We stand in recess to allow DOC to come up.
Okay. Thank you.